Welcome back in. It's another episode of Fifth Avenue Faceoff. I'm your friendly host, Chris Mack of 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh. We will keep you covered throughout the offseason. Well, it's the postseason right now. Unfortunately, the Penguins not involved for the first time in a long time. And that's heartbreaking in a way to longtime Penguin fans, including the great Dave Dameshek, who will join me today. We talked to him about whether he thinks, as a fan of this team, that they can keep it going. Can they bounce back quickly enough around the big three that they can make one more run behind Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang? And he has a theory that we've discussed in passing on social media, but we have not yet brought to the airwaves, the audio waves, to your ears here on Fifth Avenue Faceoff about the Penguins' former general manager. With that, I bring in this week's guest, Dave Dameshek. I got to squint to look at this. For those of you that aren't watching the podcast on YouTube or just listening in your Odyssey app, he's titled himself founder of the Michelle Dion fan club, Dave Dameshek. Dave, how are you?
Dude, Dion. He deserved better back in 82. Game 5, the boys in front of him just couldn't get it done there. Randy Carlisle stick couldn't stop that puck. The rest is history. The evil John Tonelli, all the rest of it. But that's in the rearview mirror. Let's talk about the future.
But luckily enough, just a year later, they all knew well enough how to tank ski it, didn't they? And before you know it, 66 was racing down the left wing at Boston Garden around Ray Bourque and putting one in.
Good times. That reminds me of when I used to be a hockey guy. I don't know if you've heard, I've updated it. Now I'm a baseball guy.
Everyone in Pittsburgh is a baseball person now, Dave. I mean, we're all on fire here this spring.
I'm trying to be a hockey guy again with this free time I didn't anticipate. So I'm giving some thought to who should be the Penguins general manager. And I heard you and Dan talking about it. Here's my 2 cents on it. You want somebody who is steeped in what's going on in the NHL right now, the players that are out there, close studies of them all. I think we're overthinking a little bit. He's right there in our building for us. He's under contract. Mikael Granlund. He stood around a lot. He was right up close. Like he was like 2 feet away from real hockey action, just standing there watching it all go by. Who knows better what's going down in the National Hockey League than that guy, right?
If you're looking for a keen observational eye, but not necessarily a man of action, he may be your guy.
No, he's what we want. You know how like Ted Williams couldn't coach other human beings? He would be like, just do what I do. It's like you need the guy who got there but wasn't good enough to really earn his keep. And I think it'd be a nice, easy transition for the guy. Hey, Granlund, we're not buy you out. Come on, man. You're a part of the family. We're gonna reposition you there. Oh, you know what? And Jeff Carter too. You're now the Penguins mascot.
There you go. You're the frozen head of Jeff Carter now serving the role of Iceberg. I'm all for that. All right, Dave. I got to ask you this. Is it over? Is it over? The reign of Crosby, Malkin, Letang, the playoff streak's over, but does that necessarily mean, from a fan's point of view, that you've given up the ghost on this core winning one more cup?
I mean, winning a cup is a tall order, obviously. So let's start with that. And, it's not diminishing the team to say that it's unlikely, because it's unlikely that any team is going to win the Stanley Cup in any given year. It goes without saying, I refer you to an ironic point of reference, which is refer you to a point of reference. Anyhow, you get what I'm laying down.
I know
I'm not a wordsmith. I speak from the heart, Mac. I speak from the heart. The Boston Bruins. I mean, where were they a year ago?
Right.
And you see in one off season, a team that was past its best days. The narrative was past its best days. Its core was aging, Pasternak notwithstanding. Where were they going to go from here in the rugged Wales Conference? And now they're the best team in the history of people. I don't think it's that insane then, given that recent evidence, to say that the Penguins could bounce back. They do need somebody to like your previous guest Dan just said there, take a scalpel aggressively to things. And I'm of two minds that they're not that far away. Yes, their big three is at this point used to be better than anybody else's big three.
Right.
That is no longer the case. So can you flesh out things around it? And ultimately, a lot of it, and I hate to be simplistic, resides between the pipes. We would be far less doom and gloom over the last two springtimes and now into this third one, were it not for what went on between the pipes. And we don't need to cover that in great detail. And so then you have to kind of decide, like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. So, Casey DeSmith and Tristan Jarry ain't the answer, it would seem. But as I always say to the Steelers fans out there, it's like, hey, we got to fire Tomlin. Like, for whom? What are you moving on to? And unfortunately for the Pens, I don't see a ton of better options that are available this offseason.
The cheap, low-hanging Yinzer fruit is Johnny Whitehall, John Gibson out there in Anaheim, right down the road from you in SoCal. Mm-hmm. And people are falling all over themselves to talk about that. Now, it would be an enormous move. It would require reallocating cap space, and you're not going to be able to re-sign this guy, and you're going to have to move this guy out who you probably don't want to move out. But that's where the goalie market is it's not in free agency, because it's a bunch of retreads and never were's. And if not for that, you're going to have to make a trade, or you're just going to reboot it with Jarry and DeSmith. And like you said, that's the definition of insanity.
I agree, except, I think you have to shake things up to the degree that you move on from DeSmith, who really played like a backup goalie. He is what he is. No knock on Casey DeSmith. Tristan Jarry has to be the difference maker as your number one. And in the short term now, he didn't do himself any favors, I would think, except that the goalie market is so shallow this offseason that maybe somebody will overspend to take a shot on him. Some optimistic GM out there will buy into the Jarry experience. But short of that, maybe it does make sense for a shorter term deal for Tristan Jarry's sake. Otherwise, then they are kind of going out into the abyss, and it is hard to spin. And if I'm saying that any optimism for next season hinges on Tristan Jarry, I'm getting pretty dark here. But really, if they go out into the abyss without Tristan Jarry, what really is going to be the option short of a guy like John Gibson, who, by the way, I'm all for it. You know me, Matt.
Yeah.
I love guys with it. It means more, as I always say, whether it's Kenny Pickett, the Pitt kid playing for the Steelers and beyond. It means more Neil Walker with the Buccos and all that. It's better when it's a local kid. It's a cooler story.
Sure.
It's easier to embrace. And you're a cynic if you're trying to talk yourself out of all that. But John Gibson hasn't been great the last 3 or 4 years. And so I don't know that he's the savior that a lot of people are anticipating there.
Some of us would argue the team built up around him wasn't all that hot, other than Trevor Zegras pulling a Michigan every 3 weeks or so. Well, let me ask you this. This is a comparison. I've probably been guilty of making too much over the last few months, but it feels real to me in that one guy decided, now he had to leave where he was and go off to someplace different. But in addition to being a baseball guy, you're a football guy as well. Your experience with NFL Network. So let me ask you this. Is it ridiculous to think that Sidney Crosby compares favorably, not in that he'll have to leave Pittsburgh to win another championship, but that in that he can find that final act in his career, much like Tom Brady did when he went off to Tampa Bay and, played to the age of 45. Sidney Crosby is in fantastic shape, still loves the game. I could see him playing until he's in his mid-40s at this rate. So is it crazy to think that they've got enough time to rebuild this thing around Sid, no longer the kid, for him to have his one final act as a champion?
I mean, no, of course it's not loony. And again, I point you to the Bruins as the evidence that that can turn things around. And we're not just looking at one season more. We in our brains, we've convinced ourselves like this. The end of the road is here. If we haven't hit it yet, we can see it on the horizon. close, and it is closing fast. But yes, as many people have pointed out, I don't know where that cliff is going to be for number 87, but it's not just Tom Brady at 45 doing what he's done. I mean, there are a lot of recent examples that we have to modify the assumption that a guy at, mid 30s is finished in any of the major sports. Look at what LeBron's doing. There are examples all over the place of, I mean, they're Chris Paul's still hanging around playing a prominent role on a Suns team. The issue is that you probably take a half step back, and there has to be a guy who is going to
take the half step forward. Yeah.
Right. Join that big three as, Ricky Raquel is, they have system quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yes,
everything's just right for Ricky Raquel. I described a year ago as a system star. He languished. He was in Anaheim, like you say about John Gibson, as a for instance. Situation matters. You put Ricky Raquel. It's one thing to keep up with 71 and 87. It's another thing to elevate their games. You saw Raquel able to do that. So that's a good place to start. And looking for some optimism here. I know you've talked about, would Brian Rust be the guy to deal? Short of him signing off on, and he has a no movement clause like Jeff Carter and a bunch of other guys. So it's unlikely.
The janitors at PPG Paints Arena have no move clauses at this point, Dave. It's insane. Everybody gets one down there.
Here is the asset that the Pittsburgh Penguins have. If you want to make the last few years of 87's glorious run in black and gold as beneficial to all parties as possible, trade away your draft picks. This nonsense of building for the future, for what? And by the way, in the age of free agency, the NFL is number one for being a year-to-year league, but to some degree, all our major sports are that now. The idea that you have to hold on to draft picks like grim death because they doom you if you don't, and Owen Pickering is I couldn't care less. With all due respect to you, kid, Owen Pickering, you look fun, you look great, all that. I don't care who you take the ice with when you make your NHL debut in 2027. That is of no matter to me. Future Dave might look back at this and say, what was I thinking? What were you thinking, dumb old Dave? But in the here and now, we have an opportunity. We have one of the 5 greatest players of all time, plus Geno Malkin still playing an occasionally dominant role there. Chris Letang, his puck dominance can't be ignored. And, there's a weird irony that, I always used to point at the Edmonton Oilers, and there are a couple examples. In fact, the Edmonton Oilers have 2 of the 6 best players in the league right now, and yet they struggle to advance past the LA Kings and to move on in the playoffs. And the other example is the Anaheim Angels, the LA Angels, excuse me.
Yeah.
They have 2 of the top 3 players in baseball, and they never come close to making the postseason. And I used to laugh at that and say, how is that possible? And now here we are with our big 3, with so many accomplishments in puck, and now undone by the bottom 6 and, a relatively soft blue line. That was enough to undo things. There's, like I say, it's a weird irony. And as we talked about previously with Hextall, it makes no sense that he got the hard part right. Who's the best example of that? Makes the hard catches, but drops the easy ones. T.O. What T.O. did for catching footballs, that's what Ron Hextall did. He did the hard part. He got Ricky Raquel and Geno and Letang all under market. I mean, look at the Rags roster as a for instance. Look how much their top 4 guys are making and how they fleshed out everything around that. I mean, Jacob Trouba is making more, if I'm not mistaken, than anybody on the Penguins, maybe this side of Crosby. But Jacob Trouba is one of their big 4 contracts out there, and they're pretty deep, that Rags team is. So, again, there's evidence that it's possible to pull it off, and this idea that they made a mistake philosophically by retaining the mid-30s guys is stinking thinking and inaccurate, because that they weren't the issue this year. It didn't limit any moves that they could have made otherwise. They just made Ronnie Hextall made some. By the way, he's a Trojan horse, right? We can now all admit now. We all see it now.
This has to be discussed, that you threw this theory out there long ago that Ron Hextall was simply a spy for the dirty Philadelphia Flyers. And
as a bitter, petulant fella, you know what? What Hextall did, he got humiliated repeatedly by number 66. I mean, just shame. This was an NHL superstar goalie, and he got pantsed repeatedly by 66 on the big stage. And so, you know what? He bided his time, spent a couple decades away, built up his resume, and when the time was right, he got himself, I don't know how, somehow talked himself into a job on the banks of the Three Rivers under one number 66. So trusting, such a gentleman. He felt bad for what he did to Hextall. He felt bad. He's like, I know what I did to you. I damaged you emotionally and spiritually. I should give you a job because I'm a good guy. I'm Mario Lemieux. That's what I'm known for.
Yeah, I feel bad, Ron. It's been tough for you. So I say, sure, you want to be GM.
Take my French fries. Yeah, take my French fries. I can't eat them. The season's almost here anyway.
Jimmy Rutherford says you're a good guy. Yeah, sure, you can be GM for a couple years. Go ahead.
So he gives him that gig, and too trusting. That's his flaw. His only flaw. 66.
I just imagine Ron Hextall, Dave. Ron Hextall in 1989 or whatever it was, chasing Robbie Brown around with his paddle in the air, trying to slice him into pieces with it as Robbie gave it the old windmill, right? And I picture Hextall thinking in the back of his mind, revenge, my friends, is best served ice cold.
His mask hid what his devious plot that he formed. And like I say, as a petulant ass myself, at the end of the day, I respect it. I resent it because I root for the Penguins, but I respect it, Hextall. I see what you did. You got in there, you ruined things, but good. And then you went back into your hole, wherever you live in Philadelphia. Go be with Bobby Clark and all the other bums over there. You've spoiled things, but good. But the good news is this: that yes, we do still have the assets that are our draft picks and the guys that will remain in the dressing room. I mean, the face of the NHL for this millennium and his two best pals. I also, by the way, was thinking about what Malkin is, because people tie themselves into knots about like, boy, they'd have been better off with Vinny Trocheck and otherwise. And by the way, that also assumes when people play that game of like, they should have gotten Trocheck. What guarantee did you have that Trocheck was going to sign on the dotted line if they didn't do, those kind of, there people get over their skis about what would have happened. Those things wouldn't necessarily have come through. But Malkin, you ever see Braveheart? Of course you have.
Yes.
It's on cable every
15 minutes. Yeah.
Right. I was thinking, you know what Malkin is? He's the crazy Irish guy who comes over like, ha, ha, ha. Like, he's wild. He plays by his own set of rules. You don't necessarily know what he's going to do. But at the end of the day, he's going to, he's on your side. Wow. He's an asset. You see?
What a call by you.
I was thinking about that. And Jeff Petrie, I think he was miscast. He's another guy who I think, if they can purge that deal and shake things up and create some cap space to get a little bit younger and more important than anything else, is faster. Obviously, it's a skaters league. You see what the Devs are doing right now. And that would get the Pens. If you combine that with 87, 71 and the rest of it, and they get, I am very excited about Drew O'Connor. If you gave me 6 Drew O'Connors for the bottom 6, we'd be right as rain. I don't know if we have the replicator, but I like him very much going forward here. And I think if you bump him up, if shame the devil, they lose Zucker, and I think you can bump up O'Connor, and I think he'll be comfortable in the top 6 there. But I think Petrie is a guy a lot of people would like to purge, and maybe you do pair him up with one of those draft picks, like I say, or Pickering, and dump him off in Phoenix if you can do that. But short of that, I also think it's a little unfair the way to disregard him, because he was just misused. The idea was that he had the howitzer out on the blue line, and yet they never used him on the power play except for those few weeks that Letang was out, and he looked good. That's what they need. They have plenty of playmakers, handsy guys and otherwise. on that PP1. What they need is somebody at the top of the triangle,
and just
hammering
grip it and
away.
rip it. Yeah, that's a great point. That's the one time all year Petrie actually looked effective. Yeah, no, if you could dump his cap hit off on someone,
I get it.
I am a fan of it. But yeah, you've laid out a blueprint here, Dave, and it starts with unloading some of the salaries, being willing to use draft picks if you can. So I'm going to put you, Dave Dameshek, lifelong Penguins fan, at Ron Hextall's old desk. First thing you're going to do is rifle through the drawers, I know, see if he left any loose change, maybe a key for his place in Delco, where he undoubtedly lives on a mushroom farm, and you could go visit and sneak in and do the old platoon maneuver where you beat Full Metal Jacket, where you beat him with the socks in the middle of the night. And then your next step as GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, once you're done beating Ron Hextall with socks, what would it be?
I like where I'm a man of peace, though. Can't you see? At the
I'm
end
sorry.
Of the day,
I'm sorry.
I just want us all to get along. Yeah, I'm tempted to say Zucker, but again, you talk about insanity, repeating the same thing, and so I think we're a little precious about maintaining, how deep, what defines what that core is. But I do, listen, the Pens are what they are. Zucker is hell on wheels. It makes the Pens hard to play against, and he lit it up last year. So given where this Penguins era is, which let's say it's 3-ish years, I think that he is an asset. He's 30. Is he 31 now? 30, 31,
30, 31. Yeah.
So I think you do your best to retain him at the right price. And then, as I say, I think you let it be known that we're open for business with those draft picks, including the one we made last year with Owen Pickering. If he projects, if you're trying to build towards something, if you are the Coyotes as an example, or the Ducks, yeah, that's a real asset for you. You're not chasing a cup in 24, so build towards the future. That's a reasonable decision for franchises like that to make, while the Pens play for right now. That my message would be that, and I'll go one step further. And as we've talked about, I don't think it's necessarily being a snob, but we are not in a position of desperation as a sports town, as sports fans, as our Pirates notwithstanding. But
sure,
we must remember that unlike the Green Bay Packers, I know we've talked about this before, but I have to point it out again. The Green Bay Packers just completed several decades of having never worse than the second best quarterback in pro football. They go from Brett Favre straight into Aaron Rodgers, little bumpy road there with Rodgers' first year, but otherwise they are one of the best teams perennially, and they have one of the best quarterbacks, and they have 2 Lombardi trophies as a result of all that. Same number as Flacco and Dilfer have. Unsatisfying. Ooh. That's not our problem. In Pittsburgh, we are flush with Stanley Cups, although I know technically there's only the one, but I think you're picking up what I'm laying down. We don't have to get desperate here. I think it's not just playing for right now to reward the guys, the big 3, but beyond that, the Penguins world in general. It would be crazy to not lean in. The idea that we should pull back and go through a couple of lean years here is talk about insane. Doing that with Sidney Crosby on the team, and Geno Malkin and Chris Letang is loco thing. Plus Ricky, I mean, they have legit NHL high-end talent on that roster. So in hiring a coach and all the moves that will ensue, the focus is not just on winning. Here's the spoil part. It's maintaining the Pittsburgh Penguins brand of puck, which is high flying, foot on the gas, kind of hockey. And that's when the Penguins have been at their best. And I'm talking about the last 30 something years of that. And I think you lean into that. There have been a couple of iterations of these Penguins over the last 20, 25 years where they've gotten sideways and like, we're going to get a coach who insists on responsibility.
Kevin Constantine's coming in, guys. Let's get serious. No.
Listen, just as the old Yinzers, like they gotta get back to they gotta get back to running the ball and playing good defense. That's who the Pittsburgh Steelers are. Like, okay, that set aside, the Pittsburgh Penguins have won, and won with the greatest of flair, the envy of fan bases the world over, that you get to watch those and they win Stanley Cups for you. We ride that for as long as we possibly can. We try to draw in a couple of pieces that will make the difference. Let's get back into the mix. I mean, here's the bottom line, Mac. For all the doom and gloom, and I completely get it. It's horrific embarrassment that the Penguins aren't in the playoffs. But when you watch the Florida Panthers play the mighty Boston Bruins, do you think that the Penguins couldn't have taken a run at that team? When you watch the Canes and the Islanders hooking up there, do you think, wow, I mean, what chance would the Penguins have had with it? Obviously, the Penguins could have kept up with these teams. Now, win 12 games and get all the way to the final. The reminder is for everybody else, you think the Rags are doing it? The Devils are doing it? You think the Bruins are doing it? The Leafs are doing it? Maybe the Lightning are going to rally and maybe they'll do it. Only one's getting through. So the idea that you Penguins fans who think that you're fooling yourself. Everybody's fooling themselves. I mean, the one team is going to be satisfied in a few weeks from now, and everybody else is going to be as devastated as we are or were last spring when the Rags took out Louis Domingue.
You're hired. Irish Dave, sidekick to Mel Gibson in Braveheart. You are hired.
You're the best, Mac. So wait, you get to be, what's his name? Braveheart?
Do I get to be? I don't want to be Mel Gibson.
Wallace?
I'll be William Wallace up until the whole flaying of the rack and all that.
Okay, well, we got to figure out who Billy Wallace is in this equation.
Sidney Crosby? No.
You know what? It's Mario Lemieux. That's who it is. What
What
Come on back, 66. It ain't right without you, friend.
He'd still score 20 a year at just a couple minutes a night on the power play. I'm convinced.
Let me show you this.
Show it to me.
There you go.
Look, there it is. Look at that. Those of you watching on YouTube, the Lemieux jersey hung up above Dave's desk out there in beautiful, sunny Southern California. My friend, thank you for the time. It was a joy catching up.
What a pleasure as always. And from the bottom of my heart, as they host the Fancy Pantses from Los Angeles, the team named Dodgers, in a town that has no trolleys to dodge, I say, let's go Bucks.
Let's go Bucks. The great Dave Dameshek, football guy, baseball guy, Pittsburgh guy, first and foremost, on what he expects from the Pittsburgh Penguins, or at least what he would like to see from the Pittsburgh Penguins going forward into this offseason. The one thing I do think is a serious point that needs to be brought up, that Dave has brought up multiple times now since we've had him on the podcast, but I think it's important to take seriously. Rickard Rakell. Look, Ron Hextall got a lot wrong. One of the few things Ron Hextall got right was Rickard Rakell. Rickard Rakell is a key to this thing moving forward. If he can be one of those support pieces, quality support pieces, and Jason Zucker, if they can keep him around at an affordable rate, those are the kind of support pieces you want around the big three, Jake Gensel included, around Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. Those are the kind of guys that really start to stir the drink as the core three, the big three, get older and perhaps can't stir that drink themselves, or at least stir it with as much force and as much vigor as they once did. Rakell showed you a lot this year, and I think it's important that we recognize that going forward into the offseason and looking ahead to the fall of 2023 and what the Penguins may be able to do. A reminder, if you have not yet, get on your horse. Get inside your Odyssey app and subscribe to Fifth Avenue Faceoff so you get notified of new episodes as soon as they are ready, or wherever you get your podcasts. I don't care where it is, to be quite honest. iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Pandora, however you do it, however you get your podcast, subscribe to Fifth Avenue Faceoff and make sure to download, listen, rate, and review. We appreciate all the feedback. And don't forget on YouTube as well. You can watch Fifth Avenue Faceoff. YouTube.com/937 The Fan. Just check mark the little bell there, the little bing, and you'll get notified as soon as new videos are available from all of 93.7 The Fan, including new episodes of Fifth Avenue Faceoff.